Hey, how's it going, guys? I just want to make a quick video here on the Shockwave 36 and just go over some points and basically tell you why I love this boat so much. And it's kind of one of my favorite boats that I've had. A lot of thought went into it. A lot of my builds usually take, a few weeks at most, depending on if I have parts or not. And if I have the parts, I build it in a day or two. But this one, I actually took my time and really put some effort into it, and it took a few months actually to get it all together. So obviously, when I had first gotten this thing, it was pretty rough and transformed it. These are nitro boats from factory, not very fast. They do like 25 to 30 miles an hour, maybe at most. Um, Still really cool though. That nostalgic looking boat. Um, Obviously, you got that sound with the nitro motor, but can't really beat the efficiency of electric motors nowadays, so had to go brushless. But anyways, some of the things I wanted to point out is I've seen quite a few other Shockwave 36s, either on YouTube or Facebook groups, whatever, and a lot of them, I see people modifying these things. A lot of them are using stock hardware, and the stock hardware that's from the nitro stuff is decent. Don't get me wrong, like the strut looks pretty decent. Um, it's kind of hard to get some angle out of it, but people use it all the time, and they seem to have good results. I hadn't seen too many that actually fully upgraded, all the hardware to modern things. So I think that kind of gave me an advantage as far as performance wise. Um, One of the other reasons why I love this boat is the color, because it looks awesome. Unfortunately, I got some chips now. That's for my tape. But if you just look at the color, like in the sun, it looks awesome because it's a metallic, well, coarse metallic silver, and then candy green over it, and it just looks great. Got some imperfections. Kind of mad because I accidentally poked the side of the boat with the other turn fins on my other boat, so it kind of chipped it right there. But oh well. If maybe in the future I might repaint this, but for right now I think it looks great. And some of the other things too I wanted to point out. I had posted a while ago on Facebook that I was able to hit 61 miles an hour with an M445, and I had somebody comment on there like, "Oh, video or it didn't happen," and I noticed some other people are like, "Well, it seems kind of fast for this particular boat." And yeah, it's only an 1800 kV, but I will say this, that I like to strive for efficiency more than anything, and I could really care less about, if it looks flashy or anything like that, or, a lot of people just automatically, they kind of want to change the motor in ESC if they're not able to get the speed that they're looking for. I rather just use the hardware I have and just try to tinker as much as possible until I get the maximum amount of efficiency out of the boat. So first thing is always, like I've talked about before, and I'm sure plenty of other YouTubers and, people on Facebook, you can go on any forum, a lot of people talk about CG and how important it is, and it's really true. The fastest I was able to get this boat before was 54 miles an hour. That was with a 50 millimeter prop, I believe, and the battery was a single 6S up front, and the boat had really good weight distribution. It handled pretty well. It was a little bit wet, I guess, so I wasn't getting full, power out of it. But it still ran really good. But I decided to do two 3S's, and so yeah, I put them on the sides, and that actually seemed to help pick the boat up out of the water some. Uh, so, I mean, with this setup, 1800 kV, 150 amp ESC, plenty of water cooling, stays cool, simple steering, nothing crazy on the steering that'll bind, just simple setup, I thought about my weight distribution. Obviously with the stock nitro motor, it was mounted right here in the middle, and there was a gas tank up front, so I thought about that. And this motor actually is not much heavier than the stock setup. So with this in here, I wanted to put the motor farther back, and I actually considered taking the stock stuffing tube out. It's hard to see, and it's actually in a wood like piece here that goes all the way back to the transom, if you can see that back there. And yeah, it's kind of difficult to get that out, so I was gonna have to cut that entire thing out, and then I was gonna mount the motor back here. Decided not to, because just for time, for one thing, and for the next, I just didn't want to have to put a whole new stuffing tube and all that when there was one that was perfectly good, and it's big enough for a .187, so it's perfect. I did my epoxy and carbon fiber cloth just to reinforce areas. Now I did something else that people would probably think is a mistake, but it's actually not. And there's a few reasons why I did this. So I did some testing with this boat and the hull, watched a bunch of videos on how these things rode, and honestly, they're a little unstable at high speed. So what I noticed is, like with a real boat, a lot of the weight, if you can get it down as low as possible, it kind of helps the boat stay down on the water. So my thought process, I thought, okay, well, let me add a little epoxy down here where it pulls up in the middle to where it's almost flat, and it comes up about maybe a quarter of an inch from the bottom, and it's like that all the way throughout to there, and then up front. And I did that so it would add a little weight down at the very bottom. Also, because I have my ESC kind of mounted higher, not that it's high, but this is a pretty low, flat looking ESC, so not really high center of gravity. Batteries are still mounted down fairly low, down at the bottom, and the boat seems to run really well. So that's just like the inside part of the setup. As for the outside, running this type of hardware on here, I noticed that when I had my strut all the way extended, it was like way out here is where my prop was. This thing liked to bounce really bad, and I don't know if that's because the prop was a little bit too far away from the boat, so I shortened it quite a bit, and that helped the ride tremendously. Next, for my trim tabs, I have my left one over here pretty much in line with the rear of the boat, so there's no negative or positive angle on it at all. And my right one over here, I have a slight negative angle, about a degree, and that's just kind of to cancel out some of the torque roll. This boat is kind of narrow, it's not super wide, for 36 inches, so when you're going along, the boat kind of wants to veer to the right slightly, and then you have to make trim adjustments. So to keep from doing that, obviously, put your trim down to the right just slightly until you can cancel out some of that roll. Also, it depends on the boat and the prop, shape of the hull, all that. So next, for this thing, trim tabs, that's super important because, you don't want to have too much drag in the water. Your turn fins, that's also super important because you don't want too much drag from those, but if you're making some corners, you also want them to catch in the water. With this particular boat, I noticed that where I have my turn fins, they are kind of low. So, if you can see that, I'm not sure, they're a little low down here on the transom where I have them bolted. So that's kind of why I have them up on the slot a little bit, just to get them out of the water some, but they're in the water enough to where if I need to make a turn, it still cuts fine. So yeah, the next thing is my strut angle. I have it angled up slightly. The reason that is it kind of pushes the rear of the boat down, and that seems to help it ride a little better. The other reason why I love this boat is because it's actually kind of heavy and solid. So when you're going over waves and things, it doesn't do anything wonky, it doesn't do anything crazy, it just cuts through it, kind of like a cigarette or a scarab or, Apache, that type of boat. Fountains as well, the cat killer. Um, all those boats are real long and narrow and great for offshore racing because, water and conditions are crazy rough. And those guys are out there flying, and those boats just cut through the water, no problem. This thing does the same thing, but it has some weight, so it stays down in the water. It's not flying up out all the time. Some of the other advantages, and I've thought about this, is on the bottom here. It's actually not smooth. So I honestly have a texture because, oh, my dog. I have a texture. It's coarse metallic silver, which was my base coat for the green. But I decided not to clear the bottom at all, and I left it kind of rough, and you can hear it. And the reason that is because if you think about it, it's kind of the same reason why they put steps on a boat. It breaks up some of the water tension, and it allows the boat to kind of glide over the top of the water. When it's completely smooth, it creates like a suction, and it sucks down to the water, which creates drag, and which actually slows you down in the long run. So I kind of thought about that and thought maybe this would help. And originally, like, my goal for this boat was to get it to do 50 miles an hour, and I reached that goal no problem. And I was really happy with that. But I just kept tinkering with it, and honestly, like, now this boat it easily hits mid 50s all the time. But if that 61 was a fluke, then, cool, but I'm pretty sure it hits 60 no problem. And yeah, it's just all about efficiency and, how much time you're willing to put into something. If you're, like to get nerdy like I do and sit and do calculations, on prop slippage and all that fun stuff, then yeah, you can, sit and tinker and figure out how much efficiency you're losing, and then you make some adjustments and you go out, try it, and see what happens. That's kind of how I've been tuning a lot of my boats lately, and that's one of my favorite things is, taking something that's not supposed to go fast and making it fast. So yeah, that's just me blabbing. Just kind of wanted to address a few things and kind of help maybe some other people understand how maybe they can make their boat go a little quicker, without just upgrading it right away. Try tinkering and try doing some other things and, moving some CG around and try different adjustments. Don't just give up and say, oh, and this is not going to work and just get a different setup, because a lot of times people do that and it still doesn't work right, and then, you're chasing it. It's like the tail of the dragon, you're always chasing it. So with that being said, yeah, hope everybody has a good day, and I'll see you later.